3 years ago, my twin sister stopped speaking to me and also forced our parents to do the same because of the stupidest reason one can imagine. So for context, my sister, Emma, was getting divorced from her husband at the time 3 years back. Her husband, Kevin, actually happened to be a really good friend of mine, and they had even met each other because of me. Kevin and I went to college together and we became really good friends. Even though he and I were close, Emma and I didn't really get along. She's my twin sister, and even though she's just 16 minutes younger than me, she had always been treated like the baby of the family, and that meant that she received golden child treatment from our parents. I guess maybe it was because she was their only daughter or something, but I always felt like my parents went soft on her and were tough on me because I was their son. So naturally, there was a certain degree of resentment that I had against her because I've always felt like my parents treated her better than they treated me. And because she got away with everything, she was also a bit of a brat. That was why she and I didn't really get along, but I remember one time, my parents had tagged me in a family photo that we had clicked on Christmas and both my sister and I were in it. It showed up on my profile and Kevin saw it and asked me to introduce him to my sister because he was pretty much smitten with her at first sight. I kept declining for a really long time, but after a couple of weeks, when I realized that he was not going to give up, I decided to talk to Emma about it. Even though she and I didn't exactly get along, Kevin was a good friend of mine, and if he wanted to ask her out, then I wasn't going to stop him. So I asked her if she would be fine with me sharing her number with this guy, and she seemed fine with it, so I set them up together. They started dating when we were in our first year of college and were in a relationship for 6 years before they decided to get engaged. I was happy for them since because of her relationship with Kevin, Emma had become somewhat bearable as well. When they got married, I was the best man and I was really happy for both of them. They stayed together for 2 years before the marriage came to an end, and it was a really ugly divorce because Emma, being Emma, decided to cheat on him. There wasn't even any reason for her to cheat, she seemed reasonably happy enough with him, but in spite of that, she had an affair with the coworker and Kevin found out about it by going through her phone. When he confronted her about it, she told him that she was just bored and that the affair didn't mean anything to her, so she was ready to end it and work it out with him, but these kinds of things don't just get worked out. Kevin decided to leave and she had the audacity to demand alimony from him, even though she had been working and had had an affair, so it's not like she qualified for it. So the divorce got pretty ugly and I was strongly on Kevin's side because even though Emma was my sister, she was the one who had cheated and it wasn't like I got along with her anyway, so I knew where my priorities were. And I guess I didn't sit right with her because she ended up complaining to our parents about it and said that she did not approve of my friendship with her soon-to-be ex-husband because as her family, I should be on her side, no questions asked. I don't know what's wrong with my parents, but they actually found her point valid and decided to call a family meeting based on her complaints. So they invited me over for dinner and confronted me about the friendship that I had with Kevin even now. And they told me that they wanted me to cut him out of my life because he had wronged my sister and his family. I shouldn't stand for it. I thought that it was ridiculous and unreasonable, and I told them that Kevin had been my friend for a really long time and I was not going to cut him out of my life. I would definitely have done it if he had been the one who had cheated. But Emma was the one who had been unfaithful to him for no reason, so I didn't see any reason for me to cut him off. And she had been sitting right there, so she got really offended and said that I had always just been insecure of her and it was showing. She accused me of trying to sabotage her on purpose so she wouldn't be able to get anything out of the divorce, and I lost my temper and told her that she didn't deserve anything anyway since she was a cheater and had no morals or ethics. We had a pretty nasty verbal spat that day and I ended up leaving early. I expected my parents to reach out to me within the next couple of days and they did, but it was only to tell me that they were cutting me off because Emma had given them an ultimatum and they were going to take it seriously. Apparently, after my fight with her that day, Emma had told them that she didn't want them speaking to me anymore because I had made it very obvious that I did not take the family seriously and I was not loyal to them. So since I had no concept of family loyalty, I needed to be taught a lesson, and she had told them that they had to choose between me and her. I wasn't shocked at all to learn that my parents had chosen to sit with her. I didn't even argue with them when they called me after telling me. They sounded very disappointed and tried to tell me that I could just put an end to all of this by cutting Kevin out of my life, but at that point, it had become a matter of principles. So I wished them the best for the future and stopped speaking to them. 3 years have passed since then, and Kevin and I are still the best of friends, but I haven't spoken a word to my family. I do see them now and again, but we avoid each other as much as we can, and it makes me sad to think that my parents chose Emma over me, but it is what it is. I didn't think that they were going to get in touch with me anytime soon, but recently, my parents decided to contact me. It was not to apologize, unfortunately, but to ask for my help. Recently, I had come into a lot of money because my business had suddenly started taking off. I am a restaurant owner, and after a particularly good food review from a really popular blogger, people started pouring in, and it's been a blessed couple of months since then. I guess my parents did the math and decided to contact me because they needed money. The funny thing is, they don't even need the money for themselves, they need it to help Emma out. Apparently, she's getting married yet again. I guess she had lied to Kevin about things not being serious about the coworker she was having an affair with, because from what I know, that's the person she's getting married to. They have been together ever since she got divorced, and they got engaged a couple of months ago, and I knew about it. But it wasn't like I was going to be invited, so I didn't think much of it. Anyway, around 4 days ago, My parents visited me and I was quite shocked to see them, but they were being nice enough, so I invited them in. The reason I hadn't just slammed the door shut in their faces was because firstly, I'm not a guy like that. And secondly, I had made the rookie mistake of assuming that they were here to make things right with me by apologizing. That was my bad. Anyway, after some small talk about my life and my business, my parents got to the point and told me that Emma was getting remarried and she wanted it to be a grand affair because she wanted people to forget all about her first wedding and remember only this one. That pretty much sounded like something Emma would do, so I wasn't surprised. But then, they got to the budget and told me that as of now, it was going to cost them at least a whopping $90,000 to be able to afford the kind of wedding that she wanted. At that point, it was nothing short of a luxury wedding and we did not come from that kind of a family. My dad was a realtor who had recently retired and my mother was a college history professor. So yeah, I would say that both of them made a decent amount of money when they were working and had reasonable funds set aside for themselves for the future, but blowing $90,000 on a wedding was unimaginable. My parents told me that the wedding was still a good few months away, so it's not like they needed the money immediately and they could afford to contribute some money from their retirement fund. But obviously wouldn't be able to cover the entire cost, and her fiancé's family had already surrendered and said that they wouldn't be able to help out. But my parents didn't want Emma to feel disappointed, and so, they had already committed that they would cover the entire cost of the wedding. That had been before she started planning and told them about the budget, and now, they didn't know what to tell her because there was no way that they would be able to afford this without having it heavily dent their retirement funds. They didn't want to disappoint her, so they had racked their brains about what to do, and eventually, they had heard from a couple of people that my restaurant was doing well. And they had taken it as a sign from the universe to pay me a visit and talk to me about contributing to the wedding expenses. They told me that this wedding meant everything to Emma because, after her divorce from Kevin, she had to get therapy because of how traumatizing it had been for her. And now, I had the chance to be a good brother to her for once and contribute to the wedding. The last time that she had asked me for something, I had refused and we had ended up not speaking for 3 years. And now, I had a chance to fix that by covering the expenses of her wedding and making it up to her. If I'm being frank, I honestly thought that they were joking. Because there was no way that they were delusional enough to believe that I was actually going to help them out here. Even if I was a billionaire, I wouldn't have made any contributions to Emma's wedding, and that's what I told my parents. But of course, I said that after having a good laugh, right in their faces. Because honestly, I couldn't process the fact that they had the audacity to come to me after 3 years and not even apologize but pretend like I had done something wrong by cutting them off instead of Kevin. Anyway, after I laughed in their faces and said that, I guess my parents got really offended, and instead of leaving, they started trying to pick a fight with me. They told me that there was nothing funny about the situation and that Emma had been right when she had said that I had no concept of family loyalty because even now when I was being presented the opportunity to make things right with my sister on a platter, I was still refusing to help her out. And this time, it was my parents who accused me of being jealous and insecure of my sister, and said that I was extremely petty. That did not sit right with me at all because I could understand Emma saying such things since she was just that delusional and stupid, but my parents knew exactly what they had done. So I really lost it and I told them that they had no right to say any of these things to me because they were the reason I didn't get along with Emma in the first place. I brought up how differently they had treated me and her all along, and they were the ones who had created a rift between us, by spoiling her rotten but then expecting me to always tough it out. I told them that they had failed as parents, and this was the reason why Emma had turned into a total monster, who couldn't care less about her own parents and thought it was completely fine to ask them to pay for such a luxurious wedding. And it was also their fault that not even their son was willing to help them out. So maybe they thought that they had at least one kid who cared about them. But if Emma genuinely cared about them, she wouldn't have asked them to cover the cost of the wedding. She would have done the math, realized that it was way beyond the budget of a moderately successful realtor and a professor, and either downsized the wedding or tried to arrange for the money herself. But she didn't care about any of that, all she cared about was herself. And I didn't feel like I needed to care about my parents because, well, it's not like they cared about me. So at the end of the day, it was because of their own behavior that they had ended up with 2 kids who couldn't be bothered to think about them. And they had nobody else to blame themselves. After I said this, my mom started sobbing and my dad cursed me out before leaving with her. At the time, I didn't feel bad for them at all because I was really pissed off. But a few hours ago, I received a text from my dad, saying that he was really disappointed in me because what I had said had broken his heart and my mother was in a terrible condition because of me. So now, I'm worried if I went a bit overboard with what I said. I feel like they deserved it, but at the same time, I feel guilty about it as well, and it's a very strange feeling. I need some opinions from you guys right now, so what do you think? Ida for telling my parents that they have 2 kids who don't care about them and it's their own fault? Update 1. Hey, everyone. So after going through the comments and stuff, I realized that you guys are right and I don't have anything to feel sorry about. I'm just a very sensitive person and maybe that's why I was feeling guilty about saying that to my parents, but they totally deserve it. I don't need to feel anything. Anyway, it's been a week since I spoke to them and I've blocked them now. It's funny that my dad had unblocked me specifically to send that message when in the past 3 years, he couldn't even have been bothered to check up on me once. It just goes to show how selfish and heartless they are, And that was to tell him that I don't care about them because I don't, and that's the truth. Anyway, a lot of people wanted to know whether Kevin had any idea that Emma was getting remarried, and yeah, he did. She had posted about her engagement a couple of months ago, and that was when he found out, so he has known about it for quite a while and he is fine with it. The divorce was really ugly and terrible for both of them, so I guess that process really helped him move on from her, and now, he has absolutely no feelings for her. He hadn't been dating for quite some time after the divorce, but last year, he started seeing other people as well. He's doing quite well for himself, and we do try and catch up every other weekend. In fact, I even told him about my parents visiting me and asking me to contribute to Emma's second wedding, and even he told me that I did the right thing by refusing. We had a good laugh over the fact that apparently Emma had to get therapy after the divorce because she was so traumatized, since from what we remember, it was she who had come up with a bunch of lies to make Kevin look like the bad guy during the divorce so she could get the alimony that she wanted and justify her affair. I have no idea why she would need therapy after she was the one who ended up traumatizing everyone. Anyway, I'm going to keep a safe distance from my parents and go back to not speaking to them. That's what is best for my mental health, and I hope that they don't reach out to me again because I would hate having to get caught up in this mess. Update 2. Hey, so around 2 weeks ago, my parents had paid me a visit and that meeting didn't exactly end well. After that, I blocked them and I had hoped that they wouldn't reach out to me again, but they contacted me yet again today. I guess they were using a burner phone because I couldn't recognize the number. Anyway, they called me up while I was working, and I was quite distracted, so I ended up answering because I thought it was an important call. But as soon as I heard my dad's voice on the other end, I was about to hang up. I didn't though, because he told me that he was standing outside my restaurant and he was desperate to see me, so I absolutely needed to meet him for coffee because he couldn't leave without talking to me. I tried to tell him that I was at work and I was going to be busy for the next couple of hours, but he told me that he was fine with waiting. He sounded very desperate and I was kind of worried, so I agreed to meet with him because otherwise, he might have entered my restaurant and thrown a temper tantrum. He didn't exactly say it, but it might have happened. And that was the last thing that I wanted, so I decided to cut my losses and just grab coffee with him. But after that phone call, I just couldn't go back to work because I was so distracted and pissed at my dad. So I decided to take a break and went out to meet him at the coffee shop that he had said he would be at. It was quite close by, so I walked there, and when I saw my father sitting inside, I immediately went up to him and I told him that what he was doing was absolutely unacceptable and he couldn't just harass me at work because he wanted money from me. But he told me that he was not here to talk about money, he was here to talk about my mother, and that took me by surprise. He told me that after that last conversation that I had with them, my mother had completely broken down and hadn't been herself. Even though 2 weeks had passed since we met, she hadn't been able to bounce back to normal and had become a shell of a person. So now, there was only one thing that could help, and that would be for me to visit her and have a talk with her. My dad also looked pretty disturbed, so I was in a very tough position because I didn't want to hurt them on purpose, but at the same time, I didn't feel obliged to go see my mother since she hadn't bothered to speak to me in the past 3 years and things have been really bad between us. After thinking about it for a while, I told my father that I didn't have the time to go see her in person, and even if I did agree to go see her, I didn't know what exactly he expected me to say to her. Because it would be a lie for me to say that I forgive them since I didn't. And I couldn't forgive them because they had never apologized. My dad started getting very agitated when I said that I wasn't going to go see her, and said that my mother was in a very bad condition emotionally because she had been really affected by what I had said the other day about none of their kids caring about them. To be fair, my mother had always been very delicate and fragile emotionally. It never took much to make her cry or hurt her even when we were younger, and everyone in the family knew that we kind of had to walk on eggshells when we were speaking to her. I do agree that my mother is a deeply sensitive person, but so am I, and if she can't let things go, neither can I. I tried to explain that to my father, but he told me that just for once, I needed to put our differences aside and go see my mom because she had completely broken down. After one point, we were just talking in circles, so I told him quite firmly that I was not going to be seeing anyone. At least not until both of them had apologized to me, and even then, I would need some time to think about it. For the past 3 years, they haven't even spoken to me. And even before that, they hadn't really treated me well. So naturally, it has become very difficult for me to perceive them in the same way that I used to, or even care about them. I've built a life for myself without them, and they didn't seem to care about it until they needed me, or rather needed my money. Now, it was really unfair of them to expect me to put everything in the past and try to make things right with them just because my mother was upset. I was also been very upset when they cut me out of their lives, but they didn't seem to care about it, and neither did they check up on me after that, even though I had also been quite hurt. I told my father I was not going to see my mom and I was really busy, so if he tried to harass me at work after this, then I would be left with no option but to call the cops. And not just at work, I didn't want them visiting me either. I made it clear that I was serious about it, then I left and went back to the restaurant because I had a lot of things to attend to. I thought that he was going to try and do something later on in the day, but, thankfully, that did not happen. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm just really tired of this and regretting letting them back into my life that day in the first place. Update 3. Hi. So I'm back here again, but this time, thankfully, it's not because of my parents. Well, technically, it is. But at least not directly, so I haven't had to speak to them yet. Anyway, even though I haven't had a good relationship with my family for the past 3 years, I've got along well with my other relatives. All of them know that we had a falling out a couple of years back, and since then, we haven't been on speaking terms, and they also know the reasons why. But nobody really wanted to get caught up in the drama, so they stayed out of it by always inviting both me and my family separately to whatever events were being hosted, like weddings and birthdays and other parties. Recently, though, one of my cousins announced their pregnancy, and I realized that my family had not been invited to the party. When I asked her about it, she told me that it hadn't been because of me, but just because she had a bit of an argument with my sister a couple of weeks before the party, around the time that she had posted the pregnancy news online. Apparently, Emma had accused her of trying to steal her thunder because her wedding was a couple of months ago, and she's so delusional that she thought that our cousin got pregnant on purpose just to outshine the bride. It was obviously a ridiculous thing to say, and our cousin decided to cut ties with her because nobody needs to start that kind of negativity when they're pregnant. I mean, can you honestly blame her for cutting Emma off? And by extension, she also decided not to invite my parents because they had taken it upon themselves to contact my cousin's parents and tell them that she was being a bit of a brat by making such a big deal out of her pregnancy, knowing that Emma was getting married in a couple of months. So for my family, I was the only person who had been invited because my cousin knew that I had nothing to do with them. And even though the rest of them not being invited had nothing to do with me and everything to do with their own behavior, they decided to put the blame on me. They just put out a statement online, saying that they had kept quiet about my jealous and insecure behavior when it came to Emma for the longest time because they did not want to ruin my reputation in the family or otherwise, but now since I had taken it upon myself to the rest of the family against them, they were going to be forced to speak up. They made it sound like it was my fault that my cousin hadn't invited them to the pregnancy announcement party, and not only that, they made me look like the bad guy for continuing to be friends with Kevin, even though he had ruined my sister's mental health during their divorce. Of course, there was no mention of the fact that she had been cheating on him, because why would there be? They called me a self-centered and insecure loser and said that they were glad that they didn't have to call me their son anymore because they were going to disown me. I wish I could say I cared, but I really don't. A lot of people sent me that post since I couldn't see it because I'm blocked, and I told them not to bother arguing with my family because clearly, they are in over their own heads. Nobody who actually matters is going to buy any of what has been said in that post, so it's not like it's doing any actual damage to my reputation, so they can go on running their mouths. I'm way above this BS. At the same time, I am very grateful to the family members who are on my side because until now, even though they hadn't wanted to be caught up in the drama, I'm pretty sure that everyone is going to stay away from my parents and my sister. Update 4. Hello, everyone. It has been a couple of months since I last posted here because honestly, there was nothing much to talk about. After that statement that my parents put out online, blaming me for everything that was going wrong, most of our relatives pretty much stopped speaking to my family altogether. And I'm pretty sure that they would have blamed me for it as well. But there was no point in making any posts against me after that, since the damage had already been done and it had gone to the point of no return. I was pretty happy without them, and I'm even happier now since I recently learned from a few of my relatives who are still in touch with my parents that apparently, Emma had cut them off. My parents hadn't been present at her wedding that happened a few weeks back, so that led to a lot of questions, and a few relatives who are still on speaking terms with them had decided to ask them what was going on, and they told them that they had to tell Emma that her wedding budget was way beyond their means and they couldn't afford it. So then, they had a huge fight because Emma was pissed since they had promised her that they would cover all the expenses, and now, they were going back on their word. They had tried to explain to her that they had made those promises because they had assumed that it was going to be within their budget, but her plans were too extravagant and they had to think about their own future as well since they were now both retired. Emma didn't like that, and being the spoiled brat that she is, she decided to cut them off and had her fiancé and his family pay for the wedding. So that meant that they had to scale down considerably and have a normal wedding but without her parents. Emma doesn't seem to be affected by any of this, but my parents are very upset from what I know, and they're very disappointed that neither of their kids seem to care about them. Which is fair enough because that's exactly what I had said in the beginning. Anyway, things are going well for me, so I don't really care about any of this. All of this just proves that you can't run away from karma, and it's going to catch up to you eventually. That's what happened with my parents. Soon enough, it's going to happen to Emma as well. So really, good luck to them.